Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Presented to you by NetSpend. Homegrown in Austin, NetSpend has been a leading provider of consumer and business payment solutions for almost 25 years. From prepaid cards to mobile bank accounts to money movement services, NetSpend connects people, brands, and payment products to deliver innovative financial solutions.
Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the podcast about the future of Austin's technology community. My name is Thom Singer, and I work with the Austin Technology Council. And over the last year, I have had the privilege to meet with over 150 technology and civic leaders in our community. And I am starting to piece together some very interesting things about what matters to help businesses succeed. Every single month, the Austin Technology Council hosts a breakfast where we talk about some sort of issue that is important to technology companies as they grow. And in June, we talked about presentation skills for tech executives. I was actually the speaker at this event because I've been speaking professionally for 15 years. I've given over 1,200 paid speeches at company events and association conferences. And a couple of people within the Austin Technology Council community asked me if I could talk about this subject because they have heard me say many, many times that anybody from any level of your company, if they have really good presentation skills, that is their secret weapon for success. And that becomes the secret weapon for your company. If you have internal meetings and someone is addressing everyone in the company and they suck at speaking, everyone in the company isn't going to follow them as well as if they are a dynamic presenter because leaders know how to speak. Same thing is true if you have people who go out and speak at industry conferences. The last thing you want is somebody representing your brand who goes out and bombs when they're on stage at a conference. So that was our June event. After the event, some people heard that it was a really good educational meeting, and they kept calling. I had 10 different people call in 2 days and say, "Hey, Tom, was that recorded? I would like to watch it, or I'd like to share it with my team." Well, we don't record our monthly breakfasts because we want you to be there in person. So no, it wasn't recorded. However, a couple of people suggested that I make it this week's podcast. Because every week here on the show, we try to hear stories of leaders who have some level of knowledge and some level of success who can inspire you to put that to work. So today, you just have me. I am going to talk about why presentation skills are your secret weapon for success for you as an individual and for your company. Now, all of us have probably been to some sort of an industry conference where the speaker was horrible. It was painful when he or she got to the point where she said, in conclusion, you thought, yeah, that's just about right. Well, this happened to me about 22 years ago. I was going out to give a presentation in place of my boss. He had been called out of town. He was supposed to present at a local conference. He asked me if I could go and do the hour-long keynote in his place. Now, I knew the company, I knew the product and service, but I wasn't really a seasoned speaker. And actually, this was more than 22 years ago. This was more like 32 years ago. However, I went and delivered the speech, and it was painful. It was really, really bad. And when I got back, my boss had heard all about it, and he said, "You know what? You need to join a Toastmasters club. You are a young man trying to build your career. You should be able to, at a short notice, like we had that day, go out and give a presentation about the company you represent and the services that we sell." And so I did. I went and joined a Toastmasters club. Now, this was before the internet. I didn't know what a Toastmasters club was. I had to call an 800 number, and then somebody mailed me a pamphlet that showed me where all of the Toastmasters clubs in Central Texas were and when they met. And then I just had to go show up. I showed up at a Jim's coffee shop in Austin, Texas on a Monday morning at 6:30. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in over my head. Everybody's going to be a great speaker. But what Toastmasters is it's a place where anybody can go and learn to speak. It's not where the professional speakers go. It's where anyone in business goes to get to practice the craft of public speaking. Because they say that the number one fear people have is being called on and having to get up and speak in front of their peers or speak at an industry event. And yet, that was something that I knew I needed to do if I was going to be in sales and marketing and if I was going to grow my career. So I decided that I was going to move forward and learn some things. So what I want to share with you today is some of the things I've learned along the way. And at the end, I'm going to leave you with the 5 tips that you need the next time you have to speak inside your company or at an industry event. So a couple of tips just to get started. Remember that everything you do is about the audience. It's not about you. If you're up there trying to prove that you're the smartest person in the room, your speech is going to come off poorly. If you think that you can't be vulnerable and you have to look like the biggest expert ever to set foot on that stage, your speech is going to be horrible. You're not perfect. You don't know everything. Get up there and be yourself. Now, don't go speak about things that you have no knowledge about. However, if you are knowledgeable on a topic and you're going to get up and share it with an audience, make sure that everything you do is focused on that audience. And you want to be prepared. You want to spend time getting ready to make sure that the speech is put together, that your PowerPoint is put together, and that it is simply not a data dump. Because we've all seen speakers who get up and just dump data after data point after data point. But if you think back in time, ancient man did not sit around the campfire and educate the next generation on how to raise the children, how to cook the food, how to farm the crops, how to hunt the animals. They didn't do that by passing out spreadsheets and pie charts. No, they did it through telling stories, not through just the data, because data alone isn't recalled. Our brains are wired to remember stories. So whatever you're trying to teach somebody, you need to be able to position it in a way where you have a story where they can see themselves in it, where they can emotionally feel connected to it. Because your presentation, that 15-minute, 30-minute, or 1-hour speech that you've been asked to give, it should be an experience for the audience. You should take them along on a journey. And this doesn't matter if you're in person in the room or if you're on virtual, if you're doing the presentation via Zoom. See, during the pandemic, virtual presentations took off and everybody thought it was the only way we were going to communicate going forward. But the truth is that virtual is still secondary in many cases to that live in-person presentation. And yet, what I'm talking to you about right now doesn't matter if you're live in the room or if you're presenting over Zoom or Teams or some other digital platform, because it's still something that you have to connect with the audience, you have to encourage the audience, you have to motivate the audience, and you have to be able to touch them in a way that they're going to be able to move to action. Now, I said motivate, and some of you are like, oh, I don't want to be a motivational speaker. In fact, many people tell me I hate motivational speakers. And in fact, if you think about it, Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live in the 1990s, he sort of ruined the term motivational speaker with his character, Matt Foley. Because where did Matt Foley live? He lived in a van down by the river. That's right. This character was a motivational speaker, but he was really a fraud. And Chris Farley did a great job of portraying this, but he undermined the respect that we should have towards people who can motivate from the stage. And I want you to think about this for a minute. You say, I don't want to be a motivational speaker. Well, what's the opposite of motivation? Oh my gosh, it's demotivation. And I don't think you want to be a demotivational speaker. One person said to me one time, the opposite of a motivation was sucking the energy out of the room. And we've all seen speakers who are capable of doing that. So we don't want to do that. We have to remember that all speakers, every time they take the stage, they are there to convey some information and get people to take action. So every speaker is a motivational speaker. And every time you present, you have to know, what is that call to action? What do I want to inspire? What do I want to inspire people to go and do? Now, when you give a speech, are you nervous? I think the answer is yes. I actually presented this a few days back for the Austin Technology Council to a full room of like 60 people. And I was nervous because while I work at the Austin Technology Council, these breakfasts aren't supposed to be the Tom show. I've been bringing in a lot of great people speaking on a lot of important business topics. But for several reasons, I was the speaker in June. And therefore, I wanted to make sure that I did a good job. Plus, when you're speaking about how to give a good speech, you have to do a good job. You have to be able to touch that audience and make them feel that they matter. So that's what I did. I sat around in the hallway as people were coming in and networking and having the coffee and eating the fruit. I was in the hallway practicing what I was going to do in this presentation because it is a big fear. Even for somebody who has given over 1,200 speeches, I'm still nervous every time I go up there. But I always remind myself that everyone in the audience wants the speaker to do a great job. Think about it for a minute. Have you ever gone to a meeting or a conference where you thought, oh, I hope this speaker is horrible and totally wastes my time? No. Everybody goes to these meetings and says, wow, I hope I am motivated. I hope I learn. I hope the speaker is engaging, because that's what we want. So you need to realize that the fact that you were invited or called upon to give the speech, you're already seen as that expert. So embrace it, and then get up there and be willing to be yourself. You have some amazing strengths and some experiences that you can share, but you don't know everything. So be vulnerable and talk about the areas where you still can improve or you still can do something different. Now, when we think about presentations, oftentimes many of us have watched TED Talks, right? Think about TED Talks that have gone viral over the last 15 years. Have you ever sat there and watched a TED Talk and thought, God, that was so wonderful. I'm so inspired. And then when they ask people, especially 15 years ago when the format of TED and TEDx first came out, they would ask people, what do you think makes these so good? And they said, they're good because they're short. Because a TED Talk is only like 12 to 18 minutes. And people thought, oh, they're so good because they're not an hour. Many meeting planners actually switched up their format and started having speakers do talks that were 10 or 15 minutes long instead of hour-long keynotes. They would put 3 or 4 speakers in that hour spot. And what they got was 3 or 4 mediocre talks. Because it's not because it's shorter that it's better. In fact, if you're not a seasoned, experienced presenter, it's actually easier to give an hour-long keynote than it is to give an 18-minute speech. So it's not because they're short that they're so good. It's because the best TED Talks, the ones that have gone viral, they've done research. And if the speaker is not famous, but they've done a great job and really had their talk go into the thing of millions of views, they've often put in 40 to 60 hours worth of preparation. Now, think about the industry conferences that you attend or that you speak at. You're not going to put in 40 to 60 hours of preparation. You don't have the time to do that. However, if you ever get the chance to do a TEDx talk, I highly recommend that you do that. But shorter doesn't make a speech better. It's the preparation and the attention to what we're doing. The TED format says you've got 1 point. It's not 3 points in a poem. It's 1 point that you're going to make. It is a point, an idea worth sharing. And that's what you have to remember is keep it simple. Do not cram everything you know into that 15-minute or hour-long speech that you have. Find the points that matter to that audience and move forward. I was really fortunate. I've given 2 TEDx talks in my career, and I did one 5 years ago, and it's a good talk. But I did TEDx Austin in 2023, just a few months ago, and it just 2 weeks ago dropped on the TEDx YouTube channel. It's called I Did That, and I think it's the best speech I've ever given. And when people ask me why, I say, well, first of all, it's because I've given 1,200 speeches, and I've done 175 comedy open mic nights, and I've done over 1,200 podcast interviews between the show you're listening to right now, my personal show, which is called Making Waves at Sea Level, and the 4 other shows during the pandemic that I was the paid podcast host, third outside podcast host for. If you add up all those interviews and all those episodes, it's been over 1,200 episodes that I've done. So I tell you, go check it out. You can find it under I Did That on the TEDx YouTube channel, or if you just go to thomsinger.com/TEDx, you'll find that speech. So when you think about speaking, I challenge you to think a little differently. Think of giving a speech like being an artist or a musician or an actor or a sports hero. All of those people put in a lot of practice over the time of their careers. They also work with coaches, and they also take each performance very seriously. So often I see executives who say, I'm just going to wing it at this conference. No. Never just wing a speech. Michael Jordan never winged a basketball game, right? A-Rod doesn't wing it when he goes up to bat. They have practiced, they have worked with coaches, they have thought through what they're going to do, and that's what you need to do with speaking is you need to constantly be flexing the muscles of what it takes to be good and then get out there and do it. So when you go to give a speech, you have to really know the purpose of why you're there. Ask yourself, why was I invited to be on this panel? Or why was I invited to be the keynote speaker? Or why did my boss want me to address the company about something that I'm doing? If you know what the purpose of why they brought you there and what they want you to accomplish, then you're going to succeed. And you need to share what you know and just put out there the parts that are important to the audience. If you've got a story to tell, does it matter to the audience and does it support the data or the point you're trying to make? If not, if it's just fluffery, don't put it in to the talk. And if you really know your purpose, you will know, what do I want to change for everyone who's listening to me after I'm done talking? If you do that, you'll be successful. But how do you get started? So I tell everybody to think of the Olympics. The Olympics spend a lot of time and a lot of money on the opening ceremonies. I don't know if you've ever been to an Olympics. I had the good fortune. I actually got to go to the 1984 Olympics, but I don't know if you've watched them on TV. But the opening ceremonies since about 1984 have been highly produced. They march in all of the athletes from all the countries, and they have performers from all over the world come in and sing and do acrobatics and dance and other types of entertainment. And the reason they do that is everybody starts off paying attention to the Olympics. Over the next 2 weeks, some people watch equestrian, some people watch baseball, some people watch track and field, some watch gymnastics. But in the first evening, the whole world watches the opening ceremony. Same thing is true for your speech. Let's say that you have an hour presentation. Your audience will pay very close attention for the first 5 to 7 minutes. That means that you can't wing it in that 5 to 7 minutes. You can't get up and tell some silly story about what happened at the bathroom. You need to be rehearsed about how you're going to open it. What is the story that's going to get everybody to lean in and pay attention? In the middle of the speech, some people won't be paying attention, or they'll be thinking 2 points back to what you said and how that relates to them. They'll come back at the end as you go to conclusion. But the opening ceremony, the first 5 to 7 minutes, the story you tell and how you set the stage for who you're going to be as a speaker, that is really going to matter a lot. Another tip is, if you're going to use PowerPoint, and you don't have to, if you're going to use visuals, make sure that they're simple. Sometimes I see people cram thousands of words onto a page or all kinds of diagrams onto a page. You want to make sure that the slides are simple, because if they're too complicated, your entire audience will be staring at the screen. They'll be watching the screen while you're talking. You want them watching you. So if you just have 2 or 3 words and a wonderful picture, it's enough to remind you what is next, and you can go into the next part of the speech. But do not use visuals as your handout. PowerPoint was never designed to be a handout, and a handout isn't designed to be the PowerPoint. If you need to give them detailed information, graphs and charts that you need to pass them out. Don't put them up on the screen. If you need to put something on the screen, simplify it. Another good tip, have a conversational style. If you're going to give a speech, you want somebody to mistake watching you for that hour as, wow, they're the same person they are hanging out in a bar. The biggest compliment I ever got is one of my old fraternity brothers from college in San Diego. He was in the audience when I spoke to a mortgage company. There were 900 people in the audience, all their top performers in the mortgage industry. And as soon as I was done, he walked up to me and said, "Do you remember who I am?" And I did. He was a few years younger than I am. We weren't close friends, but I recognized him. And he said, "God, your speech was great. And you're the same guy you were talking to us before, a rush party or some social event," because I had been rush chairman and social chairman. And he said, "God, you're the same person there." That's what you want. You don't want to get up on stage and be speaker man or speaker woman, putting on an act like you're so smart and so great. Rehearse enough. Get on stage enough times that you can just be comfortable in being who you are. Then when you tell your personal stories, or you tell your company stories, or you talk about how your company helped a client succeed, it's going to be so relatable to the people who are in the audience. And those stories and the visuals that you use connect to people's emotions. And when you can have an emotional impact on someone in your audience, you are going to connect with them as the speaker. You're also going to get them to want to take action. Now, I also, before I get into sort of the final 5 tips that I think you need to know before you give your next speech, I want to hit really hard on this point, and that is timing. If the meeting organizer or your boss, or even yourself, if you're putting on the meeting, has given you 15 minutes, how much time do you have for that speech? Well, you have a little less than 15 minutes because somebody's going to introduce you. You might have some Q&A. But if you have 15 minutes, that means from the time your session starts until the time people can stand up and walk out the door, there's 15 minutes. If you're given 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. An hour, it's an hour. You cannot run long. We've all gone to conferences where the speaker is just babbling and all of a sudden time has passed and they're like, oh, I've still got 3 more points. You guys don't mind, right? Have you ever enjoyed missing happy hour or the cookies or getting to the bathroom or getting out to go make the call that you had scheduled during a break? No, you're stealing time from people. If you run long, the next speaker has to cut time out of their speech. It happens all the time. Somebody gets up and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm only 5 minutes long. And yet they have 7 speakers that day. If everyone's 5 to 10 minutes long, we've now run an hour over. I was once at a legal conference and it was an hour and a half over schedule at the end of the day. So at the very end of the day, they announced we're skipping happy hour. No open bar. That was the promise of the end of the day. But the speakers all went 10 minutes over and each one of them thought they deserved to because they were the smartest lawyer in the world on the topic they were talking about. The audience was furious. They were mad at the meeting planners. They hated all the speakers once they realized what happened. Never steal time. If you're calling a meeting of your employees and you tell them it's going to be from 3 to 4, get them out the door at 4 o'clock. This is what a professional speaker does. It's very rare you see a professional speaker run long. Now, they might run a minute or 2 long, but you rarely see a professional speaker take more time. Many of my professional speaker friends, they're told they have an hour, the meeting's running long, they'll go to the meeting planner and say, you're 30 minutes behind. Do you want me to speak for just 30 minutes and catch you up, or do you want me to do the whole hour? That becomes the meeting planner's choice. But a great speaker on the fly can cut their talk down from whatever time is to whatever time is left. But as a non-professional speaker, you need to make sure you don't run long, or on the same token, don't run too short. I one time was speaking at an event and the person finished in 15 minutes, and yet he had 45 minutes. And the next speaker wasn't mic'd up because they were told the other person was going to go 45 minutes. As the master of ceremonies, I had to go out and riff for a half hour and do exercises with the audience. Now, I covered it and it was fine. The audience didn't even realize it wasn't scheduled. But if nobody was there to pick up the slack, there would have been this awkward silence of 30 minutes. It's the speaker's responsibility to fill the time and not run long. And then we talked about the opening ceremony. You also want to have a closing ceremony. The part you want to rehearse the most is your opening 5 minutes and your closing 5 minutes. And in that closing 5 minutes, you want to tie up everything you talked about, and you want to have some kind of a call to action that people can go and do. So I promised at the beginning of this podcast, 5 tips for speaking that you should know before you give your next speech inside your company or at an industry conference. So I hope you have a pen and paper ready. Here we go. Number 1, and I just said it, start strong and finish strong. People are going to listen to you up front and at the end. And if you can inspire them in the upfront, they'll listen to more of your speech. And if you can close with a powerful statement that gives them a call to action, they're going to leave your room and go and do something differently in their life with whatever the purpose is of why you're there to speak. So remember, if you have to rehearse, if you only have a short amount of time to rehearse, plan for a really good first 5 minutes and a really good last 5 minutes. And then the middle, it's okay if you're just sort of going through and following your slides. It's better if you can be great on every point, but focus on the beginning and the end. Second tip is know your purpose. So often speakers just get up and speak, but it's like, no, why did they hire you? Or why did they invite you? Or why did your boss ask you to get here? And what do you want everyone in the audience to walk away with? Be crystal clear on what your purpose is, and the audience is going to thrive. Number 3, tell interesting stories that support the points and the data that you're sharing. So oftentimes people just think they can data dump. The brain doesn't remember data because, as I said, we've been wired for stories going back thousands of years. So when there's a story that supports your data or the point, people are going to remember it more the next day. They've actually done surveys on this. It's like 10 times more memory if it's tied to a story that the people in the audience can relate to. Now, so often people say, well, Tom, you have more stories than I do. No, I don't. We all have the same amount of time in the day and in our life. I just pay attention when things happen and go, ooh, that's a really good anecdote that I could use in a story. So just start paying attention to what's happening around you, what's happening inside your company, how you're serving your clients, how other people in your company are successfully serving your clients, and weave those in to stories in your speech. Number 4, be really good about time. If you ever go more than a minute and a half over, remind yourself, God, I'm like a thief. I just stole 20 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you ran from the audience and from the next speaker and from the meeting planner. Now, sometimes people get mad at me when I say you're like a thief. They're like, oh, I'm not a thief. I would never steal. If you run long on a speech, you just stole that time. How are those people supposed to get that time back? How is the next speaker supposed to get that time back? It doesn't work that way. You have to know. I never go on stage without asking the meeting planner, what is my hard stop? Because sometimes I'll do Q&A, sometimes I won't. But I need to know when thank you very much and a wave has to happen so that people can go on. The next speaker can be introduced, people can go to break, etc. So be really serious. This is something I'm super serious about. Be really serious about time. I've worked with executives before who said, God, I've never ended on time. I always run 5 or 10 minutes late. And then they start noticing it when it happens to other people. And they're like, ew, people were stealing my time. So this is what I want you to leave with. Of all these points, I never want you to take the stage and run long ever again. Even if it's your event and you planned it and you're the CEO, don't do that. And the 5th point is rehearse. Practice, practice, practice. Do not wing a presentation inside your company or at an industry conference. You absolutely do not want to be the person who gets up and wings it because your speech won't be great. Now, here's the thing. Everything we've talked about in this podcast episode and that we talked about at the ATC June breakfast, all of it can be learned over time. But this is a marathon, not a sprint. You can't fine-tune your speaking skills just because you listen to this podcast. In fact, after the podcast, some companies asked, could you do training for our people? So I'm not going to make any money on this. This isn't for me, but the Austin Technology Council is offering to train people inside your company or a group of people from other companies in groups of 5 or 6 people max. And I've got a special rate for ATC members, a little more expensive for non-members. All the proceeds will go to the Austin Technology Council. But if you have 5 or 6 people on your team who could benefit not just from going through the training that I just sort of talked about, but could really benefit from sitting down, writing a 5 to 7 minute speech and being critiqued by myself and the rest of that group of 5 or 6 people, I have a program and it would involve listening to this podcast or another video that I would make. And then we would do 2-3 hour meetings where everybody would present and everybody will be critiqued. We'll come back 3 weeks later. We'll do a second meeting the same way. People will walk away with hands-on experience in giving a speech, in being clear, in putting together slides, and in presenting them and getting actual feedback. If this interests you, reach out to me at tom@austintechnologycouncil.com and I'll give you all the details. This is being offered way below market rate. It would cost you $7,000 to $10,000 to hire a consultant to come in and do this. I'm going to do it for much, much less because I want this to be a fundraiser for the Austin Technology Council and I want to be able to serve our tech community here in Central Texas. So thank you so much for always coming back week after week to Austin Tech Connect, the podcast about the future of Austin's technology community. And if your company is a member of ATC, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. You know, we're trying to rebuild this organization after many, many years, and we're trying to make it a grassroots organization. But in order to be a grassroots organization, we need your voice. We need your company. We need the people on your team to step up and share with what do we do towards the future? How can we all work to make sure that tech is recognized as the economic driver of Austin? And how do we work to make sure that we're impacting all aspects of our community? So thank you again for your support of ATC, and make sure that your company joins. If they're not a member, you can check out on our website who's a member. If they're not a member, go to your boss and say, why are we not supporting a great cause like the Austin Technology Council? We'll see you back here next week for another episode of Austin Tech Connect.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.